When did you know that it was time to fully turn your back on the banking path and drop out of LSE?
Probably about 5 minutes after I got the offer to do so. It just snowballs because then you start to raise more money, you start to get press, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, well, they've raised 4 million at such a young age, there must be something special.
I know you got some press recently. Was it the youngest Forbes 30 under 30 that you got in the UK?
Yeah, it was Europe.
I'm here right now with Piers. How old are you and what are you building?
Great question. I'm 22. We are building the next generation of robotic restaurants. Essentially, we automate as much of the back of house as possible so that our staff can focus on what humans are actually good at, which is like social interaction. So, imagine going into a fast food restaurant and you're getting fine dining level service at the same price point.
Well, cheers to that.
Oh, that's actually really good.
Thank you.
Not even joking, because I was slightly dreading it because typically green tea and stuff like that I just find not enjoyable, but it's actually
really?
that's sweet and nice, and yeah, that's good.
I appreciate that.
That's actually really good.
Thank you. Well, why don't you start out just for some background? You were a student at LSE here where we are right now, and kind of going down this traditional path, chasing after finance. What kind of went into your decision to pursue entrepreneurship instead?
Yeah, that's really fun actually, because I mean, winding a step back, before I got to LSE, I actually grew up in this town in Yorkshire called Barnsley. It's like a old mining town, pretty rough, and I was hopefully wanting to study in London. I thought, well, I need to save up money, got a job at McDonald's, and basically all through high school worked at McDonald's, saving up as much money as possible, working 50, 60 hours a week on top of school.
Wow.
Actually ended up really enjoying working in restaurants. Recognized there wasn't a lot of money in it, but just sort of thought, well, this is fun. The camaraderie is fun. The stress is stressful, but also you build a lot of good friends through that. And anyways, I got into LSE, moved to London, and then thought, well, I'd like to make some money. Typical LSE student approach, started speaking to people, got into investment banking, into private equity, and kind of left all the restaurant stuff behind. Did you find that same,
stressful environment that you liked about restaurants there, or?
It's so funny because everyone said, oh yeah, finance is so intense, but comparatively, I thought it was very, very chill.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
compared to McDonald's, you thought investment banking wasn't all that?
I mean,
that's crazy.
In terms of stress levels, yeah, because
wow.
Okay, sure, an MD can shout at you a bit, but you're getting paid an insane amount of money, and you're just arranging logos and changing numbers on a spreadsheet. So it's a lot different to a customer pouring a milkshake on your head, or
Does that happen to you?
Not to me, but to a friend.
Wow.
Or smackheads coming through the drive-through with knives, which did happen.
Wow.
So yeah, just the levels are different.
I guess there's also the stress at McDonald's where you don't really know if you're gonna how well you're gonna do. If you're in banking, you're pretty guaranteed to make a lot of money in some way. So.
Yeah, no, turns out there's not a lot of money being wagey in fast food.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did that and that was fine. But then just sort of by serendipity, met someone else, one of my co-founders, who had also had a similar background of working at restaurants all through high school and stuff. And we started working together on a few different projects during uni, including a startup drinks brand and a delivery dessert business. And we
how did that start when you were already kind of pursuing finance? When did you decide to take time away from working on modeling and stuff like that to work on the food delivery?
That's a great question. I think it was as soon as I got the summer internship, the coveted summer internship, I was like, okay, cool, now what? I feel a lot of finance is prestige chasing and stuff like that, and I was going for practicing models, DCF, whatever. Did all the interviews, sort of applied to 100 places, and then as soon as I got the offer, I was like, this should feel better than it is, and it didn't, because like as soon as I got that offer, I was like, okay, well that's the next 10 years of my life, like very easily mapped out.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people like get that summer internship and they're like, okay, I'm just going to chill out until I finish uni. But I get bored too easily, so ended up just starting these different companies, and it was very, very like hyperactive and sort of non-focused in terms of like we'd get an idea, we'd start it and try and validate it and then see what happens. And so we were doing like multiple projects at the same time. Really? I think during second year I was on the committee of 2 societies at uni, and then working on like 3 different startups in different capacities, from like co-founder to like just sort of like middle manager. And by the end of second year, they were all going decently well, but then we bumped into who is now like our largest investor, and they were like, well, you're doing all of this stuff, you're clearly talented, but you need to focus, and what is one thing you'd focus on? Like, what's the biggest problem you can think of? And we both kind of like looked into, I guess, our professional trauma, which was working at restaurants, and we thought, well, you know, there's been a million different like software solutions trying to tackle staff satisfaction, vacancies, costs, and still restaurants go bankrupt all the time, single-digit margins. The staff are extremely unhappy. I think hospitality. I remember reading in like one of the national hospitality reports in the UK that I think it may be higher, but like 2x as likely to be hospitalized due to mental health if you work in hospitality than if you're working a normal job. So the staff are deeply unhappy. They're not paid a lot. The restaurants don't earn a lot of money, and also there's a huge like vacancy issues, like over 100,000 jobs missing in like restaurants and hotels. So software wasn't going to cure that, so we thought hardware, and we got to work. And we built an MVP in 6 months, raised a good amount of money, and then in terms of that like go to market, we didn't want to take like an unproven product and try and partner with an established restaurant chain. They're going to have a bunch of demands, and you know it's going to be a very slow iteration cycle. And so we thought, well, hey, we've both actually already worked in restaurants, let's build our own restaurant. And so that's what we did, and we opened a restaurant in central London as literally like a living lab of, you know, deploying like our sort of newest and roughest tech at all times to just learn as much as possible. And you know, you can run like controlled tests in controlled environments, but you do not learn like hospitality until, as I said, you've got customers screaming at you, and you know, like just all the chaos that you get from a brick and mortar business.
Yeah, I mean, in that environment, did you have, since you kind of brought these engineers into that maybe weren't so familiar with hospitality, what were their thoughts starting to experience that?
Yeah, it was really very interesting. I mean, one thing we did try to do is we tried to get as many people on the tech side of the business that had some draw to food. It could just be that they were sort of into sort of cooking all our meals at home. But actually like...
Someone that values high quality food that doesn't...
Yeah, just any sort of interest. Because I think like at least a cliche sort of tech worker or maybe more software engineer is like very mercenary. You know, you work at Meta 1 year and then you work at Google, and like, you know, there's not much loyalty, and sort of your passion lies in the code you're building as opposed to the product you're working on. And I think for a startup, when you've got like a very small N of people, you need people who are all very passionate and willing to like work the hours. And so yeah, we always tried to get someone with some food interest. So like our head of food has like this sort of STEM food background. He has a PhD in microbiology, but then also has worked in fine dining. Our CTO is like top of his class from Imperial, but then was also like a Deliveroo driver during university. So everyone's kind of got this like some form of trauma. And yeah, still though, like getting sort of like our interns and our junior engineers to work in the restaurant was challenging, especially because like they're so driven on just like improving the tech and like working on tech, like they're deeply passionate, and so saying, hey, can you come away from soldering to wash dishes for an hour is like a very hard pitch. But it was really, really helpful, because then that same mindset applies in, oh, I'm washing dishes, I'm washing the robot that I've made. oh God, it would be way better if this part was designed this way so it was easier to clean and stuff like that, which you just won't pick up from having your engineers sit down with the staff trying to like converse.
Yeah.
And you're getting like non-technical staff explaining technical things to a technical person and trying to work out, you know, through the mist. Whereas what we can do is just say, hey, go do it yourself and figure it out.
And you save so much time there where the developer is able to firsthand experience maybe shortcomings with maybe it's too hard to wash, instead of having to wait till they ship the product to hear that from somewhere like McDonald's if they had
exactly
that there.
Yeah, and you know, you think about all the other frictions you get, which is, you know, if your client is having issues, then obviously you're damaging that commercial relationship. You've got your business development guys arguing with your tech guys, and there's a lot of friction there. And instead, what we have is just a fully like vertically integrated stack where everyone's on the same team, everyone's working towards the same goal, and you're just learning very, very quickly. And I mean, we're only 2 years old, and we've made a lot of progress. And I would argue, sort of, the people who came before us who've had a harder time. One of the sort of big issues is they were just working in like a sort of a closed loop for too long.
So kind of backing up here to starting this out, when did it go from, I mean, 2 students, or did you say it was 2 students at first?
Yeah, there were.
It was you and your friend.
Yeah, it was 2 of us like very initially, and then like very quickly became 3 people and then 4 people.
Yeah, so you also mentioned it was the 2 of you just kind of working on different experiments to see if there was demand in different areas. At what point did you get the attention of investors and their involvement?
Yeah, so we started with a bit of money initially because, as I said, like we did get approached of what do you think the biggest problem is? You should focus on that.
Who was that person and how did you get their attention?
It was literally just as I said with how I ended up working on startups in the first place. It's like serendipity.
Yeah.
It's just one person, you know, made an intro to say, hey, you guys should chat, and then one thing led to another, and we were pitching them for investment. And yeah, those early days was just a lot of research. Like I think we visited like 100 different competitors just in hospitality before even looking at robots. And then we like flew to China and saw kind of what we consider the bleeding edge was in China in terms of like these fully automated restaurants you get in China.
Really? Well, I didn't hear about this before. At what point in the business did you fly to China? Was it before it even existed? Was it around when you were doing the kind of pancake business?
No. It was kind of that first 6 months of the company when we were designing the MVP.
And was that paid for by you, or was the investor at this point kind of funding that?
Yeah, we had a few investors on board by then, and then our sort of big fundraise came after that 6 months and after that MVP was developed.
Okay, for early founders or students that are interested in becoming founders, do you have any advice for what you did in that serendipity? Because you went over, you know, talking to people, how people would just kind of start to gravitate towards it, seeing what you're doing. Do you have any advice for people that feel kind of lost or just feel like that's really impossible for that to happen to them?
Yeah, I mean, luck is a huge part, right? So like setting that to one side, like you just need to maximize your luck. And I think you can do that by just being like very nice. It's a bit cliche, but I would say most people want to actually help you. Like if you do someone a favor, you feel good, right?
Yeah.
So long as you're not like a dick, you'll find most people will help you. And if you can be sort of even better than that, you'll find people will volunteer to help you. So case in point, like you say, hey, I'm kind of interested in starting a company. I have a passion in restaurants. And then someone says, oh, actually, I was speaking to someone a few weeks ago who's also interested in restaurants. You guys should meet. And, you know, again, you have that meeting and you're nice and you're personable and you'll just find it snowballs very quickly.
That's awesome. Because, yeah, I get a lot of comments on social media about how that's just so unlikely to happen, but you're totally right. Just kind of putting yourself out there and making these steps definitely gets people's attention, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one correct route anyways. We were very capital intensive from day one, so we couldn't bootstrap. But you're seeing increasingly now that like most stuff can get bootstrapped, or you can, you know, start with a very, very small team and a very, very small budget. I mean, like case in point, your company. Yeah.
So yeah, go over a little bit more about in the early days how you went about scaling out this team. You had identified the issue with restaurants, you had the problem, and you had, at this point, the guy on board who was going to help you fund some of it. Mm-hmm. How did you go about building this initial team?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's like the most critical part in the early days, not just from building like a great product, but also just building confidence. Because I think when you're a young company and you have no name, and especially if you're young founders, it's very hard to build trust because you have no experience, you have naivety. You kind of need naivety to even like tackle like a big challenge. And so I think it's very, very important to not be dilutive in hiring and to kind of have like an incredibly high standard. And as soon as you convince like one like very, very cracked person to join, then other people will think, well, he must have joined for good reason, so maybe I'll consider. And then a lot of stuff in those early days is just a case of snowballing. So we had an incredibly high bar for those first few people, and then it just made the next bunch like very, very straightforward. But I think sort of going into like the more scale up phase, keeping that discipline is really important, because I think it's easy to say, well, you know, if we're trying to get to 10 people, we can't hire absolutely everyone from Oxbridge and Imperial and them have relevant experience. You know, we can start to train people up into our way. And at the end of the day, you're still a young team. You probably never managed anyone. And as soon as you kind of lower that bar, you'll just find that it can start to slip and slip and slip.
Definitely. That's something I'm always trying to be particular about, because, yeah, like you're saying, if you start to let people that aren't very passionate about it on the team, it definitely kind of lowers the esteem of the entire team.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually a great point. It's like when I say high standards, I don't just mean logos, I mean passion, you know? Sort of taking like a counter example is you can get someone who has like a great academic background, great experience, but you know, if they've never cooked a meal in their life, or sort of never really eaten at restaurants beyond like, you know, maybe McDonald's, it's not going to be a fit, because eventually they're going to need to come in on Saturday, or they're going to need to work like a long day, and it's just going to start to, you know, grind to a halt. Yeah,
definitely. So with your current location in central London, as you've been building that, how much again have you raised so far?
So we've raised 4 million to date.
Wow.
Yeah.
And with that, I mean, most of that's obviously just gone into the kind of hardware. Mm-hmm. And do you have major plans for expansion coming soon, or are you planning to wait a bit longer till you feel kind of better about the tech?
Nothing that can be shared too deeply. But I would say, like, for scaling a restaurant brand in general, you're selling people a system, whether that, depending on your business model, that's franchisees or it's landlords, customers, whatever. You're selling people on a system, and that's not just good food, but it's efficiency. And that is, you know, tenfold when you also have like sort of robotic systems involved, AI systems involved. And so making sure there's like a high degree of polish is really important, whilst also mixing that in with like the typical like VC, like aggressive scaling model. I think like Pret took 5 years to go from 1 site to 2 site. And you can look at a lot of restaurants and they'll sort of have like a similar gap of 1 to 2 sites is like 3 to 5 years, and then 2 sites to 20 sites is maybe, you know, 12 months. I mean, even McDonald's, if you've seen the movie, like, yeah, it's one location for ages and ages and ages, and they try to scale and they fail, and then they get the right partner and they scale.
Oh yeah, so it's pretty uncommon for someone your age to have raised $4 million, and I want to know what you think you guys have done differently in that process of raising money to be able to secure that much money and get investors to trust such a young team.
Yeah, I think it's just signaling and momentum, really. I feel like people definitely get like bogged down in sort of numbers and business fundamentals for pitching like VC. But at the end of the day, for very early stage capital, I think that they're ultimately expecting the business model is going to change a lot, and the company's going to change a lot, and so they're really trying to bet on like the founding team and if they can like change with the business and adapt. And you just have to do that by like boosting confidence in yourselves, which is really, really hard when you're young. And so we took an approach in the early days of just getting like external votes of confidence through like very sort of prestigious advisors from like big food companies, big science companies. And then as we sort of started to build, I think communicating that those people who made those sort of like early votes of confidence were right by just showing like momentum. So even people that sort of passed on investing at certain stages, we would still like share investor updates with them all the time, and we try as much as possible to do monthly updates and just say like every month something new was happening. And then
how did you do that? Did you have like a newsletter type of thing you would send out, or would you just write one email and send it out to a list?
And like VCs get hundreds and hundreds.
Oh, you make like a little presentation, monthly update.
But it'd be like very, very, very simple, and lots of pictures, because anyone who's looking at that deck is just going to flick through. And
when you have actual pictures of it's you doing it, making the building stuff.
Exactly. And again, like
much more meaningful.
Exaggerating that vote of confidence in you as like a young founder, and especially if you're working on anything physical. Whether that's drinks or hardware, you've got a real advantage over sort of the sea of software companies that like. What can a software company kind of share in an investor update? It's like screenshots of like the Figma and, software engineers coding at 2 a.m. But that's about it. And that gets old very, very fast. Whereas, you can share pictures of being in Nepal and sort of being at parties and like sharing this drink. And then for us, like we've got people tinkering with hardware. We've got a live restaurant. So there's always something to show. And then you're starting to build like internal confidence with investors. So it's no longer just, these people believed in them, so maybe they're right. It's now like, we're seeing it with our own eyes, like these guys can do stuff. And then again, like using Snowball, again, it just snowballs, because then you start to raise more money, you start to get press, you start to raise more money, and then all of a sudden it's, they've raised 4 million at such a young age, there must be something special. And then you're good to keep going.
Yeah, definitely. That's pretty interesting. How have you, I know you got some press recently. Was it the youngest Forbes 30 under 30 that you got in the UK?
Yeah, it was Europe.
Europe, wow.
So Forbes 30 under 30 Europe 2025. I think there was 3 founders on the list at 22, including me. And then there was like 2 other people who were sort of younger, but they were in like sports. So youngest founder on the list. I think the average age is like 27. So it was really, really cool. And definitely a very weird feeling, because you kind of like wake up and random people from like first year of uni are texting you saying like, congrats.
That's so awesome. How did that kind of come about? Did they reach out to you? Is it like
believe it's confidential?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think like the one thing that can be shared is like it's referral based. So like
cool.
If you're on the list, I think you get asked like yearly to submit someone, and we got nominated by someone that we knew.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then it's just from there. But you need to be Googleable. So the more PR you have, the better in place.
What's the strategy you've had for building up PR and being Googleable, like you're saying?
That's a great question. Honestly, like again, luck's a big part. I would say we're cheating a bit because robots in restaurants is like a very sort of, I'd say like sexy thing for the news. But I think in the early days you're chasing them. So like you're emailing journalists with pre-written articles saying like, hey, this is our story. Do you want to hit your like quota? Because like most sort of journalists at smaller publications, I think, have like a quota of like 10 articles a month. So you're essentially trying to give them like one free article out of that quota. And then once you have that like foundation that someone can Google Piers, Millar, and a few articles come up, and I think like our first few pieces was like Yahoo Finance, Barnsley Chronicle, which is my hometown. Once you have that initial bit and people can read it, then it will just scale from there. And then I think like sort of the switch up was when Business Insider reached out and the Telegraph reached out, and then Forbes reached out.
Nice. What about social media? Even though I guess you do have a consumer-facing end, but what has been like a strategy to use social media for your company?
Yeah, we've put because it's a hardware company and we're so dependent on like great engineering talent, we put a lot of effort into employer branding. And you know, sort of a derivative of what I said with the investor updates is we just tried to share as many cool pictures on LinkedIn, and tried to sort of just show there was a cool place to work where you could work on cool problems. I think especially for engineers, where if you're a hardware engineer at a big company or a software engineer at a big company, you're kind of working on like a very small part of the greater system to improve. So if you're a software engineer, you're maybe improving a button for 6 months. If you're a hardware engineer, even if you're working on something cool like F1, you're maybe improving like a wheel on a car for most of your career. And we were very fortunate that we could show pictures of like single engineers building whole prototypes and whole robots. And so that got the first sort of few people on board, and then that signaling thing kicks in where you've got a bunch of really like cracked engineers on board, and they start sharing stuff. And then you can start to sort of get involved with universities and sort of university societies, and you can build like an employer brand, and you can start attracting like good talent, and then good talent attracts good talent, and then it snowballs.
Yeah, it keeps going from there.
I mean, like case in point, like Anderill's just done like a huge employer branding effort on Twitter, and I think that's gone very, very well for them.
Yeah, definitely. You also mentioned, you know, bringing on some of these big advisors, and you've cut a lot of this out to just kind of serendipity and luck, but what have you done to kind of push that forward? I know that you've had some pretty interesting strategies at getting some of these really big guys, like the head of development from Subway on board.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, sort of spanning from what I said about luck is, I think like celebrity said this, which is like, luck is just an opportunity that you're prepared for, which I guess is a more deterministic outlook on it. And like, for me, that was definitely like cold outreach, which is, if you imagine like the opportunity as someone looking at your cold outreach, is you just want to be as prepared as possible for them reading that message. And so I remember, instead of like searching 100 names and writing them like sort of a template message that maybe has like one reference to an experience in their LinkedIn, I would like try to sort of deep dive as much as possible on every person on that list. And so, for example, for our Subway guy, like he was in a band in college. It was actually a very cool band, but they have like an album on Spotify. And so I like listened to the whole album, like dropped him a message, said, hey, I really like this song and I like this song. And that was just enough to get the ball rolling and chatting. And then we started sort of sharing that mutual trauma that everyone has in hospitality about like the issues with staff, the issues with operating. And then, we got him on board. And I think it was a very similar approach for like a lot of other people that we got on board, was just like a very, very personal touch. And you know, I think people make it out that sort of reaching out to 100 people hyper-personalized is a waste of time. But again, when it's those very, very early days and you're just trying to get a vote of confidence, it can make or break a fundraise getting one guy who's like worked in an industry leader to believe in you. And so, okay, you can maybe reach out to 100 people with a template message and it'll take 10 minutes a person, so it's 1,000 minutes. Or, you know, you can spend 20 minutes and I think you can probably get like enough to write an actual personal message.
You think it took you 20 minutes to write that one? I feel like that sounds like...
Well, I have to listen to an album, so that was like that was a little bit more aggressive, but not everyone's got an album online.
That's true.
But yeah, like...
What have you done to like get more information about them? I mean, was that on his LinkedIn that he had the band, or?
It was just on Google.
Really?
Yeah, because I think like artists come up on Spotify and Google.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, I would say on average, if you grab someone's name and they're a genuine industry leader, because that's an important part as well, is like it's very easy to say, oh, well, this guy worked at Heineken, let's get him on board, and he was like sort of middle manager at Heineken and just never did anything for 3 years. If they were like genuinely influential at that company, they've probably done an interview at some point, even if it's like with the nichest publication. Like, I think one of the guys we reached out to did an interview with like a hospitality magazine, but it's enough, and it's enough to come up with something interesting. And you know, especially if you are like someone who works in like a niche industry, you will remember all the interviews you've given. So if someone's like quoting, hey, I remember when you wrote this, it's enough to be like, well, they've done their research, as opposed to just, I've skimmed their LinkedIn for 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, at kind of what stage were you doing that? Do you still do that? Was it just kind of early on? We built most of our advisory board out very, very early because, I think for us, we just really wanted that vote of confidence, and it was a lot cheaper to just reach out to people cold than to try and pitch, for fundraising to people with no backing. Because that's another way you can obviously gain confidence, right? Is like by raising money, but chicken and the egg. It's very hard to raise money without confidence. Were you taking investment with these advisory roles, or?
No, it was just pure advisory shares.
Really?
Yeah, and I think like definitely lean on being like young and naive, because like people will want to help you, and it's true. Like I think like a very common issue with a lot of startup founding teams is they think, I'm just I went to a great uni. I'm smarter than the competition. The reason why the big companies haven't done this is just because they're stupid and slow and ancient. Yeah. And that's frankly, in my experience, just not true most of the time. And maybe one player, but most players have people in that company that want to change things, because everyone wants to be everyone now wants to be the person who like discovers sort of the next big thing.
Yeah. But I mean, it also depends on the industry, because it's like, why is this not picked up by Diageo yet? And I feel like bigger corporations won't want to step into a market until it's at maturity.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's a great way of thinking about it, because for us, when we spoke to people, they were all up for it, but they just didn't want to take that plunge.
Yeah.
Right? They were all like, we think labor is a huge problem. We really want to go for it. We don't like anything that's on the market right now. And that was a big inspiration for us to open our own restaurant, because it's just show them the market, right? That's definitely true. But I think I can't remember my original point. I think like the summary I was getting to was like, if you're a founding team, you will just be missing quite a lot of like important industry information that you can get from just speaking to a few experts and just having them like, I think people imagine that an advisor is going to be holding your hand every week, but no one's going to commit that amount of time to you, and it's not actually useful. But spending an hour a month talking to someone and getting like some great anecdotes and some great advice is, a game changer.
Definitely. So you just kind of have them on board where like once a month maybe, or as needed, you'll speak with them?
Yeah, as needed. Like if we've got a real estate advisor, obviously we're going to be calling them a lot more when we're acquiring real estate than when we're doing tech R&D, but I'd say that's kind of the average. That's enough. And I think as well, like I really would say advisors are like very, very underrated in early stage startups. Another big advantage I had when I was like securing some of our real estate was leaning on our advisors for authority. Because again, like I think I was 21 at the time, or 20, like going up to sort of 50-year-old landlords that are managing like £100 million real estate portfolios and saying, hey, can you lease this site to us? I promise we're not going to, burn it down, and we'll pay rent for the next 10 years. It's really, really hard pitch. And when they try to float like a rough set of terms on you, you can't really say like, oh, well, this isn't what we're used to, because you're not used to anything. But you can say, hey, well, I called up my advisor who's got like 40 years in industry, and he says this is bullshit. Change it or we'll walk. Yeah. And you can just get a lot more respect faster. And again, like, he doesn't need to be there. You don't need to, pull the advisor into the meeting with you.
That's true.
But you have that vote of confidence.
Yeah, and you're no longer just a naive kid that can kind of tell, well, that's not how it works. You have the backing of this guy that might,
You're the best of both worlds, because you have that enthusiasm and energy that you can have as like a young founder, but then you've got enough of the expertise that you can have as like an industry vet, and combine them both.
Definitely. So what's your plans for the next foreseeable future?
Me or the company?
You and the company.
Yeah, I think just continue to build that great system. I spoke earlier about like it needs to be a robust system, and that's not just tech, that's operations, it's food, and never losing sight of that. Like I think the brand should not be remembered as a robotic brand. It should just be remembered as a great food brand that happens to use robotics to get there.
That's great. Do you have any advice for young founders in college, in a maybe similar position where they feel kind of anchored or driven to go towards a secure career like investment banking or consulting? Do you have any advice for why they should, if they want to go into entrepreneurship, pursue it now rather than pushing it off till later?
Yeah, that's
if
interesting.
If you think that's the case.
No, I've definitely got all thoughts. Hot take, I think get the offer, then decide. Because I think getting the offer is half the reward. Is saying, hey, I got into McKinsey but turned it down to start a company is a way better story than I was going to apply to McKinsey, then I decided to start a company. And then also, like, you can make a very objective decision on, do I want to work on this problem because I think it's an interesting problem, as opposed to, I want to be a founder and I want to be cool, so I'm going to kind of invent a problem and then 2 years down the line discover I don't actually have a problem to solve. So, that's exactly what I did. I got my offer and then I was like, okay, now what? And then I started exploring, and I had like a very stable platform to decide whether I wanted to like get involved or not. I would also say, like, obviously depends on your course, but if you've got a light course load, try to do like part-time stuff as much as possible. And that's definitely what I indexed on, is like all through second year, just worked on a bunch of different startups in a part-time capacity and like sponged up as much information as possible. And you can get a very quick idea of how you like to work and sort of what you like working on.
When did you know that it was time to kind of fully turn your back on the banking path and drop out of LSE?
Probably about 5 minutes after I got the offer to do so. Like I remember coming back to tell my friends about it from having like the meeting. And I was like, so I got this offer. And then they're like, oh, that's crazy. And I was like, I'm probably going to take it.
And then on the offer of like an investment or?
Yeah. Start the company with some initial like seed, like, well, not seed, but like pre-seed money, but drop out and sort of drop all active projects that you're working on to just go all in on this. Because, at the time I was doing a lot of different things. And yeah, it was just like a very gut instinct to do it. And I did like potter about it for a few days, like talking to people and asking for advice, and basically most people told me not to do it. But I just kind of knew straight away. And also I just think it's like such an unusual circumstance to be in, to get that opportunity, and you just have to go for it. And like, at the end of the day, 20s, like, if it doesn't work out, you can just go back to professional services if you really have to.
Would you have, if you had the IB offer and, you're saying go back to professional services like that, okay. Do you think you could even go back to IB? I guess you could go into maybe VC?
Yeah. I think like, especially when you get locked in on the sort of, I'm going to do IB, then PE, then, Harvard or whatever, like the path.
Yeah.
It feels like it's impossible to sort of have anything unconventional. But, most people take like gap years, or like, if you're from Singapore, you have to have been in the military, there's like mandatory service. So everyone's kind of like in different stages of their life. And I think everyone kind of has like a budget of like a few years to mess around, and they'll still be able to do whatever they want.
So would you recommend people start something now rather than later?
Oh, massively, yeah. think about your life and when you've got the least to lose, and it's probably like your 20s and your 60s. From 30 to 50, you have kids and a mortgage.
Yeah.
So it's a terrible time to like start a company. Or if you do, you're going to need to like pay yourself a huge salary and be very risk averse. The only times it works is when you're like, you've got no liabilities, which is 20 and 60. But unfortunately at 60, you don't typically have the energy. However, you know, you can then see like a lot of people sort of towards the end of their career start advising startups, right? And getting involved in some way.
I feel like you don't have as much experience at 20 than you do 60, but there's so much, then you can have the rest of your life to enjoy the actual payoff of the work if you do it at 20.
Yeah, also, you know, if you're just younger, you do have more energy, and you're going to have to work like 996. You're going to be hunched over a desk for like long periods of time. You don't want to do that when you've got back pain and when you have to like get up like multiple times in the night. I'm not saying that's like everyone as they get older, but it is most people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you can like differentiate on a few things as a person, but you're not going to be like different on absolutely everything. And like, you know, age is still going to catch up to you. Life is still going to catch up to you.
All right. Well, Piers, it's been really awesome to get your insights on everything. Really great to hear about Kaikaku, and thank you so much for coming here today.
All good. Very good to try the drink. Cheers.
Cheers.